past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Well, greetings and welcome back as always. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Today is, I think, day 22 of the government shutdown. Estimated 900,000 workers have been furloughed. Consumer prices rose 3% from the earlier year through the month of September, according to the Labor Department. They posted that today, slightly hotter than August's increase of 2.9%, and the fastest pace since January. That's a measure of core prices that strips out volatile food and energy costs. Those also increased by 3%. Both came in below economists' expectations for a 3.1% rise, as pressure on housing costs has eased a bit. One of the issues that comes to my mind is, can we trust these numbers since Trump's unwarranted attacks on the integrity of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, which has undermined trust in economic data and has accelerated retirements of key personnel in the agency? What's really happening here on the ground in the lives of average Americans? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into the current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at a couple of today's headlines. The Washington Post reports average Obamacare premiums are set to rise 30%. The price increases affecting up to 17 million Americans who buy coverage on the federal marketplace are by far the largest annual premium increases in recent years. The premium spikes, mirroring the rising cost of private employer-sponsored plans, arrived during a protracted and bitter congressional battle over healthcare insurance costs. The Washington Post also reports Social Security check increases are in line with inflation, but trail key expenses. Millions of Americans who collect retirement, disability, survivor, and dependent benefits will see a 2.8% bump in 2026 in their Social Security checks. But the AARP survey conducted in September say that 77% of older adults feels a cost of living increase that won't be enough to keep up with rising prices. And here's something that's very relevant to those of us of color. The approximately 40% of African-American retiree households have Social Security as their sole source of income. 40% of retired African Americans are retiring solely on Social Security. The number for whites is about 16% for white retirees. Finally, the Pentagon orders aircraft carrier to Latin America as the president signals escalation. They have sent the USS Gerald Ford battle group into the Caribbean Sea. Folks, operating a carrier strike group, such as the Gerald Ford, estimated cost to operate that $6.5 million per day. Per day. While American retirees are struggling to make ends meet, while it's estimated that those getting money through the Affordable Care Act exchange, they're going to see a 30% rise in healthcare costs. The president is wasting, pouring into the ocean, literally, $6.5 million a day, while he wants to send 40 billion of your tax dollars to back up the Argentine peso and buy beef from Argentine farmers, putting American beef farmers out to pasture. Well, let's talk a little bit about this. In fact, I want to know, remember, prices are up 3%. The president told us he was going to lower prices. Are we in the he-right world from Superman's Bizarro world? I mean, this makes no sense. My guest is a political journalist, Pepperdine University professor, and prominent convener in the fields of dialogue and social change, Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey. I think I got it right.
You did. You sure did. It's a pleasure to be with you, Dr. Leon.
Hey, man, thank you so much for joining us today. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. So there's a lot of discussion about the impacts of this shutdown. I wanted to take some time to discuss the practical impacts of this shutdown and thought that I needed to provide some data points in terms of context. Your thoughts, you can take it where you want to take it.
Well, I mean, I think you laid it out very well, Dr. Leon. Everyday Americans, ordinary folks are experiencing a whole lot of pain. I mean, oh my goodness, we're only 9 months in to the Trump second term, a term that this president on Inauguration Day promised would lower costs for everyday Americans, would usher in what he called the golden age of America. And just going through some of the numbers that you just shared, it's hard to see anything golden about Obamacare premiums rising by 30%. There's nothing golden about 40% of retired African Americans, who solely depend on Social Security, somehow having to do a whole lot more with that little bit. There is nothing golden about an aircraft carrier being pushed out to the Pacific at the expense of $6.5 million a day, while everyday people are struggling to pay for their health care. While everyday people are struggling to pay for their child care. And while the people of this country are watching the president put more focus on demolishing the East Wing of the White House and building a $300 million ballroom than getting the government up and running and getting people back to work.
As we listen to the narratives, the Democrats are saying this is our only point of leverage, that we've got to go along with this shutdown because the Republicans say, well, let's pass a clean continuing resolution and then we can deal with the anticipated rise of healthcare costs. And the Democrats are saying, no, we can't do that because we can't trust you. And some would say, oh, that's just political posturing, until you look at the fact that it's the president that has been directing Mike Johnson, do not negotiate under any circumstances. And Mike Johnson, for all intents and purposes, has closed the House of Representatives. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think we are living the consequence of that deficit of trust. It's not just a deficit of trust related to addressing the rising costs of Obamacare healthcare premiums. But look at the representative that was just elected in Arizona, Representative-elect Rivalda, where Speaker Johnson, has been doing everything he can to not swear her in to office. Now, there's some that suspect that he's not interested in swearing her in because he don't want no smoke related to a vote on the Epstein files. But all of these things contribute to a lack of unity on just some of the basic functions of government. We can't even agree that lowering the cost of healthcare, making healthcare affordable enough for everyday Americans, by the way, who are Democrat, Republican, and independent, right? Obamacare subsidies don't just help Democratic voters, it helps all voters. It helps everyone who participates in our healthcare system. And so I was reading this morning that Leader Thune did not suspect that the Democrats would hold out this long.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sort of taken aback that the Democrats have sort of grown a spine. The Democrats are demonstrating some backbone. A lot of the sources that I talked to on Capitol Hill and right here in California are pleased to see Democratic leadership finally standing up, and pleased to see Democratic leadership standing up in advancing a righteous fight, what they believe is a righteous fight for the dignity and the healthcare of everyday people.
I have to blow my own horn here because, well, first of all, Norm Clement, my dear brother, thank you so much for that $10 super sticker, Norm. Really, really appreciate it. Dr. Norm Clement, thank you very much, Norm. Really appreciate that. But when the whole discussion about a government shutdown first came to the forefront, I was saying on every platform that would have me that this would go as long as the Democrats found the spine and backbone to fight it, and that Donald Trump is expecting that Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer will fold as they've always folded up to this point. And I think Thune is absolutely right that now the Republicans have backed themselves into an ideological corner because now they feel they have to dig in their heels because the Democrats are fighting a whole lot tougher than they thought they ever would. And I'm shocked as hell that they haven't fought. But we'll get to the numbers in a minute. Your thoughts, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the timing of this fight couldn't be better for Democrats as we're almost a year out from the midterm elections. We're coming up on the November off-year elections. And a lot of people are paying extra close attention to the New York City mayor's race, where Zohran Mamdani is leading in the polls and expected to win decisively in that mayor's race if those polls hold. But people are also paying attention to New Jersey and Virginia. People are paying attention to the campaign for Proposition 50 here in California, the redistricting proposition that would basically suspend the independent redistricting commission in California for some years, and would then allow for the people to carve out 5 Democratic seats here in California. And so all of this is happening at a moment where this president isn't very popular, where the Republican Party and Republicans in Congress are not very popular at the moment. And so, this may be a preview as to what we might see in 2026, but that is assuming that the Democrats don't take their foot off the neck of Republicans on Capitol Hill. And so time will tell.
In fact, when you look at some of the polling data, 45% of registered voters think Republicans in Congress are more responsible for the shutdown. 39% think Democrats are more responsible. And 11% think that there's equal responsibility to be shared. This is from the Quinnipiac poll. And among independents, 48% think Republicans in Congress are more responsible. 32% are attributing this to Democrats. So to your point, right now, the numbers are indicating that the voting public sees the Democrats being on the right side of this issue. I think it's also important, though, to realize that I think today is the first day where these up to 900,000 federal employees have missed a full pay cycle. And so now that we're moving into the beginning of the second period where people will be missing a full paycheck, once we get into another week or 10 days or so, and it becomes those food pantries that a lot of people are now finding themselves having to go through, they will start to be struggling. When that screw starts to turn, what do you think will happen to these numbers?
I mean, I see the numbers getting a whole lot worse for Republicans, worse for the president than better. Because again, remember that these issues transcend political party. Mm-hmm. There are Democrats, independents, Republicans that are impacted by this. Missing a paycheck, government workers missing a paycheck. I mean, what happened to the idea of a good old government job, right? This administration seems to be mocking the idea of a good government job. And by the way, that includes folks who serve in our military. It includes folks who are a part of the TSA. In fact, I was just traveling back to Los Angeles from Washington, D.C., and I was reminded by one of the TSA agents that right now they're furloughed. They're not getting paid, right? We're heading into the holiday season. And so, this doesn't look good. The optics of this in ordinary times would lead to, plummeting poll numbers for any president, any party in power. But somehow this administration has been very good at being able to distract folks from the real pain that their neighbors are experiencing, real pain that may be coming to a doorstep near them. And so, this is the question really is, how many rabbits out the hat will the Trump administration, will the Republicans in charge, how many rabbits will they be able to pull out of the hat in order to pull focus from the real pain that everyday Americans are experiencing? I mean, my goodness, to hear White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt this week from the White House podium, say that the president's top priority right now is the ballroom, a $300 million ballroom, a ballroom replacing the East Wing, a ballroom that at first account was about $200 million and now is up to $300 million, a ballroom that is paid for and subsidized by some of the biggest companies in the United States, many of which were right there on the dais as President Trump was being sworn into a second term. Companies like Google and Apple and Amazon are all in on underwriting the cost of this 90,000 square foot ballroom while the government is shut down, while everyday people are out of work, while government workers are losing their job. And by the way, when we say government workers losing their jobs, we're not just talking about government workers in Washington, D.C. We're not even just talking about government workers in the D.C., Virginia, Maryland area. The majority of federal workers, as you know, Doc, they work across the country. Here in California alone, there are about 150,000 federal workers. And so to think that this president and this administration's attack on federal workers, the purge of federal workers, if you think that's just going to hurt Washington, D.C., and that's not going to revisit itself upon wherever you are, you got another thing coming.
Well, that's a great point, because you're right. And it's a natural part of the thought process to attribute or to assign, when people say the government shutdown, people think, well, the government is in Washington, D.C. No, this is the national government. And so there are Department of Education offices in every state of the country. So when you saw a couple of months ago these Republican town hall meetings that Mike Johnson has now directed Republicans to no longer hold, and you had angry Republicans screaming at their representatives saying, this is not what I voted for. What that really translates into is, you weren't supposed to screw me. It's not my fault. Look at what he's doing with the soybean farmers. Look at what he's now threatening to do to American beef, literally putting them out to pasture. And so the ire that is being created here transcends party lines. And you now have Americans, just Americans, pissed off at their government.
I think you're right. I mean, and there are a number of folks who can't resist the urge to say, I told you so. Because during a very contentious 2024 campaign, President Trump was very clear on what he intended to do. He was not playing around when he talked about mass deportations and, really leading a mass deportation campaign, the largest of which we've ever seen in American history. He's delivering on that. This is an administration right now that is, trying to find a way to be able to employ the Insurrection Act. The Insurrection Act as a cut around local and state government that has gotten in the way of them basically federalizing a police force that reports to the president. That should be terrifying to anyone who believes in the rule of law, anyone who believes in our Constitution, our civil rights, our civil liberties. And so Project 2025 is underway, but it's important that we are not overwhelmed. I think it was the famous Alice Walker who once said that the fastest way that people give away their power is by first believing that they have none. And part of what we saw on No King's Day were a number of our fellow Americans, our neighbors, our friends, who stepped out and spoke up and registered their displeasure. They registered their discontent with the actions of this president, with the actions of this government. And, Doc, I oftentimes think whenever I see mass protests like that, how many of these folks are registered to vote right now? If the folks who showed up at No Kings also show up at the polls in every election, then I think that's the opportunity, to build the more perfect union that we have in mind, a more perfect union that is in line with what has been the tradition, with what we have come to know as the intent of the framers of the Constitution. But if we sit it out, if we succumb to the cynical hot takes on social media, if we give away our power, then watch out, because that wrecking ball that currently demolished the east wing of the White House, that wrecking ball has range, and it may reach a home near us, if not our own.
One of the things that really, really just disgusts me about the tearing down of the East Wing to build a ballroom is Donald Trump can't even dance. If he could dance, then all right, man, I'll give you some latitude.
You mean he
can't even dance?
You mean he ain't break dancing?
Man, he'll break if he dances. Aziz, I like this. He says, no more town halls. What's next? Stop answering the phones. And that gets to the point of power to me. And you talked about Alice Walker. That it also takes me to Stokely Carmichael when he returned back to Lowndes County, Alabama, back in 1970, when they had the freedom, the Black freedom struggle, trying to get folks in Lowndes County to vote. And he said to them, he said, you know, when we first came down here in this struggle, you all didn't even think about electing a sheriff. You all didn't even believe you had the power to elect a sheriff. You never even thought about putting a Black name on the ballot to elect a sheriff. And now you have one because you found you have the power to do so. So when Aziz says, what are they going to do? Stop answering the phones? Well, if they do, that means you got to show up at the door and bang on the damn door until they open the door and let them know you want something. You demand something different, because the first three words in the Constitution are "We the
people." That's right. We the people. And, you know, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, Doc. You know, there are a lot of folks out there that, in delivering their hot takes on social media and their commentary on cable news, remark saying, you know, the government's broken. Mm-hmm. The political party system is broken. And I would argue that it is largely doing what it has been designed to do. Mm-hmm. And the question is, have we, the people, have we been fulfilling our part of the bargain?
No, we've abdicated our responsibilities.
Yeah. And so so we can't abdicate our responsibility and then say, well, it's the system's fault. It's the political party's fault. It's the president in power. It's their fault, right? You know, we the people we are the beginning, middle, and end of this democratic experiment. Mm-hmm. We decide. Are we going to be the end of it? Or are we going to be the beginning of sort of a rebirth of it? But, you know, I like to say it all starts with where our feet tread first, right? And so I think this is a moment where we all have to sort of dig deep, and we got to ask ourselves, what kind of community do we want to live in? What kind of country do we want to live in? You know, what kind of example do we want to demonstrate, you know, for not just our friends and neighbors and fellow Americans, but what kind of example do we want to demonstrate for generations that have yet been born? And what that looks like, we get to decide what that looks like, you know, but I think given the current state of affairs, I think we all have to take a strong look. I know the 92% says look somewhere else, right? And I understand that. But, you know, the old world's not coming back. It's not. Mm-hmm. If we think that, okay, we're going to get him in the next election and we're going to rewind the hands of time, that's not how this thing works, right? There's a new world that is emerging. And I think we need to be active in practicing some radical imagination and really envisioning and doing everything we can to manifest the world that we believe we deserve, the world that is indeed that more perfect union.
I think there's an awful lot of validity in what you've just expressed. And part of the problem that I think people are having with formulating the thought that then would lead to the action are the distractions, the many, many distractions that are being thrown out there to keep people off balance, hence sending the Gerald Ford battle group into the Caribbean. This talk about attacking Venezuela. There are a number of distractions that we're finding ourselves being confronted with. And so this is where I think one of the things when you start examining the logic of the framers of the Constitution, I think it was Alexander Hamilton that talked to us about being wary of the power of factions. And they were really afraid that these groups of elites would wind up taking control of the government and at the expense of the majority. Well, folks, what is so important here is you've got to decide what is important to you and then coalesce with people of similar interests. And if enough people are coalescing around these similar interests and making demands on the system, that can have a tremendous impact on the direction that this thing goes. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and we've lived it. I mean, look, as a student of history, it's not lost on me the movement building work, the organizing work, the community and political organizing work that took place in order to deliver civil rights legislation that makes my life possible, that makes so much of what we do possible. I'm talking about the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act and the Fair Housing Act, all of which are very vulnerable right now to a very hostile U.S. Supreme Court when it comes to civil rights and civil liberties, very hostile White House, a very hostile Congress at the moment. Our people, Black people, have emerged from the worst of times. And I know that there are many days when, we're scrolling through our social media feeds, or we're reading the paper or watching the news, and it feels like we're living in the worst of times, and it makes you just want to throw up your hands. I understand it. And some days you may throw up your hands, but the key is don't leave your hands up. It's okay to throw up our hands, but it's also okay to roll up our sleeves too. And we get to decide, what that's going to look like, both online and offline. We've been through a lot, very, turbulent elections. We've survived. Many of us have survived the pandemic. And so we've got to believe that we're here for a reason. We're here for a reason. And I think that it's important that we don't let the dark forces among us have the final say on why we're here.
My parents would tell me, in the midst of struggle, in the midst of turmoil, that is not the time to panic. That is the time to focus. Once you solve the problem, you can panic all day long. But in the midst of the conflict, that's the time to fight, not the time to panic. And I think that still right now, there are too many of us that are mentally paralyzed and don't know what to do. Hey, do something. Do something.
And let me add, not just mentally paralyzed, but I really feel that our nation is still overwhelmed by grief. I don't think we've ever really processed the grief collectively as a nation from the COVID pandemic, where we lost over 1 million or 1 million of our fellow Americans. I don't think we've processed the grief that many feel, not everybody, but many feel from what happened in the 2024 election, right? Seeing a sitting president during a debate not on their game in a way that called to question whether or not he was competent enough to serve, right? Let's take the politics out of that for a second, but watching that had an effect on this nation. And what ensued, the question of whether or not we had that steady hand, and the question of whether or not the White House would go back into the hands of Donald Trump, or maybe we would try something different, right? And so I think we're still living with the grief of so many things that have happened in a short period of time that has shaken our confidence in our leadership, right?
Well, and I'm glad that you made that point, because I believe a huge part of the basis of that grief is, how'd you all let this dude go up here and do this? You all knew he was walking around in the middle of the day in his pajamas eating ice cream. How are you going to let this man who doesn't know where he is roll out there on the stage? How did they being the party leadership, how was it the middle of July with the convention taking place in December, and we were still having this debate about whether the man was mentis compos mentis? That showed an incredible weakness in the leadership.
Well, I think it also showed a disconnect with the people. I think there were a lot of people left, right, and center that weren't expecting the former president to be a two-term president. And so, when we talk about original sin, not the book specifically, but we talk about well, what was that original sin, for Biden? I think that original sin where that trust and confidence was called into question was when he said in 2020, hey, I'm running to be a transitional president. And, right before the 2024 election, he says, I'm running for re-election. People said, who, right? And I think it's important that we're not ageist, right? I don't think people question his running for a second term because he had aged. People had questioned it because, they were ready for something different.
No, but he was clearly demonstrating it. You're right. We don't need to be ageist, but he was clearly demonstrating he was non-compos mentis.
Well, so I'll say this as somebody who covered the Biden White House and who saw the president at events and things, I found him to be an aging president. I didn't, and with his stutter, I think sometimes people read into the stutter. Anybody who stutters, I think sometimes people think that maybe you're less intelligent or less coherent or something going on, right? And so I think you put some of those things together. In addition to, don't forget that Donald Trump and the Republicans from day one, were trying to make this into a weekend at Bernie's presidency from the very beginning, right? So you put all these things together, and I think there are a number of folks whose concern escalated with every gaffe, every trip, every stutter. And I don't think his team took that seriously enough. But I think we always have to be careful about diagnosing people with dementia or Alzheimer's or stuff like that if there's no medical expert that has done that and has examined them.
Final point on this, because this could be an entire show.
Yeah,
I was at the Air Force Academy when he fell, and initially sitting through that 2.5 hour Iditarod of a graduation, I said, wow, that's impressive. He stood here and shook all of those hands and spoke to all of those cadets. Wow. And then he fell out. And he didn't trip. Dude fell out. So the way they tried to spin it, as though there was a problem with the carpet, there was something. No, he had reached his limit and dude just fell out. So, stop. This is not directed at you. I'm directing it at those that were trying to make it appear as to be something other than it was. No, the man had reached his limit. And so I want to go back quickly to the New York mayor's race.
Yes, sir.
Because now we have Eric Adams and Cuomo together. I think they were sitting at the Knicks basketball game. That might have been where they were together. Thumbs up. We're united against their own party's nominee. This is very bad form for the Democrats nationally and very bad optics, because it demonstrates they are resisting progress and they want to maintain status quo. That's what I take away from that Adams Cuomo picture. They will fight to maintain established order, irrespective of what their own electorate is directing them to do.
I mean, I really think the New York City mayor's race is a proxy for the tension that exists right now, not just within the Democratic Party, but the tension that exists amongst opposition to the MAGA movement, opposition to President Trump and the Trump administration. I think the fact that you had this relatively unknown New York Assembly member that mounts this campaign that is not as well funded as some of the bigger names that were running for mayor, and through ranked choice voting becomes the top vote getter. He won the Democratic nomination fair and square, and the fact that the Democratic establishment, there are members of the Democratic establishment that fail to recognize that, or I should say fail until recently. I just read this morning that Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, has finally endorsed Mamdani for mayor, only a few weeks out from the election. I think that does more for Hakeem Jeffries as a talking point than it actually does on the ground to help deliver votes and deliver support for Mamdani. But this is the problem that the Democratic Party and opponents to MAGA need to reconcile. I think folks are looking for more candidates like Mamdani who understand that folks care about somebody who's going to step to Trump and push back at Trump, but they also care for somebody who can do that and also lower costs for them, make life more affordable for them, make childcare more affordable for them. So while Trump is over there trying to so-called make America great again, they want somebody who's going to make life affordable for them. Mamdani can hold those two ideals, and he is young and fresh and charismatic. And I think opposition folks would be wise to look for who are the other Mamdani type candidates that are out there that they can support. And by the way, support early, not support just so your Wikipedia doesn't have you on the outs from supporting a Democrat. Just saying.
Well, to Jeffrey's point, that reminds me of I think it's Alexandre Auguste Rollin, who said, "There go the people, I must follow them, for I am their leader." Hakeem, thanks for getting on the train. Finally, the train left the station without you. So thank you for getting on the train. When you listen to Mamdani, it sounds a lot, if you remember Jimmy Rollins and the Rent is Too Damn High party. He ran in New York on the very same premise that Mamdani is now running on. So I think you're absolutely right in your analysis. And so the question I believe that we're going to find out from this race is, where do the Democrats go relative to progressive politics going forward outside of MAGA? I think you're right about MAGA, but I think it goes beyond MAGA. Where are they going to be? We have known them at least since the 60s, to be the progressive element of our politics, and I'll use that very, very liberally, compared to the Republicans. But what we have found in more recent dynamics is they've become the party of war. They have become more, thank you, Bill Clinton, for moving the party right with the Democratic Legislative Council. They have moved away from the progressive elements of politics to the more conservative elements of politics. And the Mamdani race could very well be an indicator you need to start moving further left.
Yeah, I think you're right. And, I was just reading an article in a local publication here in the LA area, the Pasadena Now. And I was reading about the Pasadena School Board and how Pasadena public schools are about $150 million in debt. They're facing a major deficit. And if they don't get their act together by the end of this year, they could be under receivership by the state of California. And, my sense is that there are more Democrats than Republicans that are on the school board. But, I think in so many ways, what's happening in Pasadena schools is an example that Democrats across the country would be wise to study. If Pasadena public schools, we ain't talking about no inner city, we ain't talking about Oakland or Philly. We're talking about Pasadena. If Pasadena public schools are on the verge of being put into receivership, I think we've got to ask ourselves if Democrats are out there saying, wait a minute, stop harming government, MAGA, protect government, invest in government workers, then it seems to me that this needs to be the party that is best in class when it comes to governance. And to the extent that folks are able to point to examples of Democrats being in power and not delivering that best in class governance, I think that is that's a part of what fuels the MAGA movement. The MAGA movement as a disruption to the status quo. Yeah, there's some people that where MAGA's bigotry appeal, that's their thing. But for some people, I think MAGA's appeal is that it is disruptive, and they are so sick and tired of being sick and tired and being told by Democrats, we'll wait a little while longer and we're going to nibble around the edges here and, platitudes. No, people are sick and tired of having their, tax dollars go into systems that don't seem to be making things materially better. And
does the rhetoric match the action? Does the Democratic rhetoric match the Democrat Party legislative agenda? And in too many instances, the answer, particularly for African Americans and other people of color, the answer is no. And primarily, I think a lot of it has to do with there are issues that they have perceived to be more valuable to them as issues, politically valuable to them as issues, as opposed to solutions. And abortion is one of those issues.
Yeah, I think it's uneven. I think there are examples.
What is uneven?
Well, I think there are examples of Democrats, leading, on the state and local level, on the federal level. Spin the wheel. There are a lot of issues that Democrats champion in this big tent. But I think a lot of folks say that Democrats are terrible at messaging.
They are
messaging, right?
I'm one of those people.
Yeah, and that may be part of it, but I don't think it's all of it.
No, it's not.
I think Democrats can do a lot better when it comes to message, but I think they can do even a lot better in terms of projecting a vision that is not reactive to Trump. And I think people want to know fundamentally, where are you taking us? Where are we going? And the fact that, I'm just going to take you, in the opposite direction of where Trump's trying to take you, that ain't enough. That dog ain't going to hunt, not today, not tomorrow, and not twice on Sunday.
I have been saying that for years. How are you going to make my life better? Explain that to me. Telling me you're not Donald Trump and telling me that Donald Trump is an idiot. He tells us that every day. So I don't need you to tell me that. I need you to explain to me how you're going to make my life better and back up that statement with legislation. And too many people have found them, held in the balance and found wanting. I think that is how the phrase goes. But our time is limited, and we need to get to this. Kevin Baptist, thank you very much for that super sticker. Do you too feel that Trump will suspend midterm elections by declaring a national emergency? Let's tie that question to an interview that Steve Bannon did with The Economist magazine, and we've got a clip of that. If we can run that, as they say in the commercial, let's roll that beautiful bean footage. Bush baked beans. Go ahead.
Accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. And the way we finish it through Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will. And you can tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term.
An instrument of divine providence. Now, you're a student of history. You understand when we were dealing with monarchies, the reason if you ask the king, why are you king? He would tell you, well, I'm king because I'm an instrument of God. God put me here to rule the realm. This, to me, is going past a whole lot of people the same way Steve Bannon said in 2017, we're going to deconstruct the administrative state. Mm-hmm. And the same way Russell Vogt has said, we are in a post-constitutional America. People aren't paying attention. Dr. Quartey, your thoughts, sir?
It's a perversion of the Constitution. It is right there. The fact that that Steve Bannon could be so brazen in an interview with the editor-in-chief of The Economist. And that's the play, and this administration, they're not hiding from what their intent is, right? Mm-hmm. When you look at Project 2025, when you look at Project Esther, when you listen to that Steve Bannon interview, among others, they're going to try something. They're going to try something. They're going to disrupt business as usual when it comes to our elections in some way, shape, or form. The fact that this administration is looking for a way to employ the Insurrection Act, the fact that they are testing out their ability to be able to go in with federal forces in cities across the country. Remember, elections, federal elections are really a collection of state and local elections, right? There's no federal election group that is organizing every election. Yes, there's a Federal Election Commission, right? But elections are really organized and implemented by state and local leaders. And I would be very suspicious of the promise of a free and fair election, particularly in states that are controlled by Republican governors and Republican legislatures.
To Kevin's question, do you too feel that Trump will suspend midterm elections by declaring a national emergency?
He's going to try.
When Steve Bannon tells you we have a number of options, wait and see. Well, the federalizing of the National Guard, sending the Marines into Los Angeles, sending ICE into Chicago, threatening Oakland. That's one of their options. When we look at Trump calling the governor Abbott in Texas and saying, I need you to redraw your electoral districts and find me 5 votes. And now North Carolina is doing the same thing. Folks, the name of the show is Connecting the Dots. You need to connect these dots, because one of the other options would be a constitutional amendment to change the 22nd Amendment. And so they're trying to create a base within Congress and a base within state houses to where they would be able to pass one.
Vote while you can. That's the message. Vote while you can. Don't take it for granted.
Overwhelm the system with your vote.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you know, that's what folks have to do. You have to register your displeasure, register your discontent at the polls. There were, for heaven's sake, there were at least a third of folks who were registered to vote in November 2024 that didn't. And I think the organizers among us need to find out why and figure out how to reach those people. There's a silent majority out there that's not happy with what's happening in Washington, that's not happy about what's happening on Main Street or their street, right? But the question is, what is the vision for the future? You know, what is the alternative to this horror show of a status quo? That is incumbent on the leaders among us.
I'm going to repeat this because and tell me if I'm tripping. And when Steve Bannon told you in 2017, we're going to deconstruct the administrative state. That means we're going to change the tax system. That means we're going to change the way that the government departments are structured. That means we're going to decimate the federal workforce. He told you that in 2017, and it went over the heads of damn near everybody. Now he says Donald Trump is going to be your president for a 3rd term. And let me quickly read to you. The 22nd Amendment. No person, it's very, very clear, shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. And no person who has held the office of president or acted as president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of president more than once. The 22nd Amendment is very clear. No person shall be elected. And it doesn't say maybe, it says shall be. And shall, it legally is more powerful than may or will. So how does Steve Bannon figure? I assume the man can read. How does Steve Bannon figure that Donald Trump can be elected to a 3rd term when the 22nd Amendment is very, very clear?
I think
we have options.
Yeah. And I think one of those options, I think they're going to try and play this game of, well, if he gets another term, a 3rd term, he would only have served 2 consecutive terms.
But the word consecutive is not in the 22nd Amendment.
We know that, but when you have control of Congress,
that's my point.
And you pass a law to
That's
change
my point.
that.
That's my point.
And is that one of the things that they are going to try and do? I mean, make no mistake about it. Hold your hat, folks. You know, we are in uncharted waters. The campaign in 2024, the campaign that Vice President Harris led, she laid all this stuff out. And so nobody should really be surprised that so many of these things, unfortunately, are coming to pass, and he is attempting to make them come to pass.
That's why I'm saying, folks, he's trying to change the structure of Congress. One of the options I think they see is a constitutional amendment changing the 22nd Amendment. Because to your point, it doesn't say consecutive. That's a mistake that that's an assumption that a lot of people make. is that the 22nd Amendment says you can't serve 2 consecutive terms. It doesn't say that. It says very simply, you can't be president more than twice. And so I think they're trying to stack the deck as they're playing with these voter maps and they're playing with these seats in Congress. They're trying to create the environment where they can pass an amendment to the 22nd Amendment. Stromboli, the Pope of Hope, thank you for that $10 super sticker. Thank you, Dr. Leon, along with all your guests, for spreading the awareness of the reality of America as well as its relation to its citizens and the rest of the world. Well, thank you, Stromboli, the Pope of Hope. That's why we're here. That's what we do. That's why we have brilliant guests on the show, such as my current guest. And I want to thank you so much today, Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey. And again, I hope I got it right. I've been practicing. I hope I got it right.
You got it right. You got it right.
Okay.
Dr. Leon.
You got it right. Mine's a lot easier than yours. Hey, man, really, really appreciate you joining us. And I hope that you will grace us with your presence again.
Anytime. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. Folks, well, again, I got to thank my guest, Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey. Thank him so much for joining us today. Thank you all so much, as always, for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode next week. We'll get our guests together over the weekend and let you all know who you can look forward to hearing from on Monday. Please follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. All the links are below. Follow us on social media. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all next week. Have a blessed remainder of your day and weekend. Until then, I'm Dr. Wilmer Leon. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Hey, bro, thank you.